Absolutely. Would like to introduce our speaker for today, a dear friend and colleague, Dr. Juliet Iwelunmor. She is a professor of medicine and an associate director for global health and dissemination at the Washington University School of Medicine. She is a passionate advocate for health equity and sustainability. Dr. Iwelunmor is widely regarded for understanding how to make evidence-based interventions last, reshaping the focus on community engagement, using participatory research, improving the dissemination of health information, while amplifying the voices of communities in the design and implementation of health interventions. She is committed to developing and empowering researchers to reimagine sustainment, beginning with a plan that supports how evidence-based interventions last, particularly in settings limited to resources. Prior to joining the Washington University School of Medicine, she served as a professor at St. Louis University and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. From 2010 to 2013, she worked as a program specialist for the intersectoral platform on HIV at UNESCO in Paris. She is a graduate of Penn State University, where she earned her doctorate in biobehavioral health with a minor in demography, and began her grant writing journey as an NICHD F31 pre-doctoral scholar. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Iwelunmor as she presents this very interesting topic of today.
Thank you so much.
Juliet, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm currently in Nigeria right now, and my hope is that the Wi-Fi will not mess me up while we're here, but I'm here. It's an honor and privilege. I wish I could touch some of you. I just left the ministry, so it's just always humbling to come home, to connect with the stakeholders on the ground and get a better sense really of what you guys are doing here. Country innovation. How do you move the innovation on the ground forward to do the real work we all want to do, especially in the times we find ourselves in? Everybody's going to be thinking of how to last. These are really interesting times, but we can get through it. We have to get through it because there is no justice if there's no health, so it's not up for debate what we have to do for health. All of us are going to have to find our communities, dig a deeper, because we need to. Many people that are not here right now, that are not on these calls right now, are relying on us to be their voice, right? And relying on us to really push the agenda forward, that the work that your institution, for example, the work you have done is not in vain. We're going to really not leave PEPFAR at this time. We're not going to abandon people that depend on us at this time. And instead, we're going to use our platform, our voices, to speak on behalf of everybody you are working with, the names, them. It's not a figment of imagination. It's not just names, a roster somewhere sitting with some dust being collected. These are real life people that you guys have been impacting, and the work of your hands deserve the praise, deserve the attention, deserve the justice, for humanity's sake. It's not the time to roll back anything. It's the time to work. And so I'm here to share that, now more than ever, we're all going to have to think about how we're going to make our work last with or without the resources we have. We're going to have to really dig deeper into country innovation. And so again, you're charting the way, you have been charting the way. And so if anything, I think I'm here to learn from you guys, more than ever, how do you really get country innovation moving in such a way that it lasts over and beyond the noise that exists in our communities? And so if I trip or if I'm going around, because of Wi-Fi, just feel free to say you've lost me, and I'll try to make sure I come on board. So my apologies for that as well. But let me go straight into what I hope is going to be helpful to all of us. I mean, again, now more than ever, sustainability is going to be key, and there will be hurdles. I just wanted at least preface this to say that as we get towards the hope, the truth of the matter is there'll be dips. We've all faced it in one way or the other. So, to say that what we're experiencing now is new is not true. If you really dig back into the history of the work we've all done, there have been hurdles, maybe not at this scale, but there have been hurdles. But we all know the hope of what we're doing. And so my next couple of minutes here is to say that as we get through the hurdles, and we will get through the hurdles, keep the hope in mind because it's crucial for the work we're all doing. So Juliet Iwelunmor, I am at WashU. And it's an honor and privilege to be here at this meeting with you guys. I like to begin usually with this image from one of my favorite book, Petit Prince, Little Prince. Some of you may have read the book, some of you may not have. And so if you see this image, usually when I ask what do people see, let me pause and maybe ask that, in case you've not read the book. If you're seeing this image, what do you see? And you can put it in the chat or you can come out and speak in terms of what you're seeing. I'm going to look to if anybody has put anything. Looks like a hat. Okay, Chinedu says it looks like a hat. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? What are you seeing when you see this image? I see, looks like a snail, a snake swallowed something. Beautiful, beautiful. Any other person? Looks like a rock. Okay, so we've had a snail, a hat, a snake, a rock. All of it are beautiful answers. And for me, I sat here because that ultimately is what sustainability is. It will be defined differently for different people. All I'm going to do is lay the stage of what I think prior researchers have tried to do, but understand that your approach to sustainability won't be wrong because it's a journey. It's a continuum. I might see a hat and that's okay because it looks like a hat, but you might also see a snake swallowing something, right? A snake swallowing an elephant. And the truth of the matter is the journey is huge. To sustain anything, it will require you swallowing something as big as an elephant. It can look like a snail because yes, it's a slow process. It's going to crawl. No one can say, I'm here to sustain and boom, in 5 years, I have sustained. No, that's not what it is. It will feel like a rock. You're always going to be between a rock and a hard place if you actually think you're going to be on this journey where things are going to always, pitch you against each other and pull you over. I'm here to say all of that is correct. And so then what do we do, right? And so what I'll do is take us through a historical context of people that have come before me to talk about what sustainability is and why it matters. We're going to keep talking about some of the hurdles and opportunities and maybe then begin with a plan and take that into some of the work we're doing here in Nigeria in hopes for some next steps and future directions. So some background. Me personally, I'm a grant writer. I am a tried and true NIH grant writer. It's all I know. I was trained at Penn State as a F-31 pre-doc, as you heard in my introduction. For all its flaws, and people can say what they want to say for all its flaws with all these systems, it allowed me to be here. And I don't take it for granted that I am not the typical person that is writing any of these grants and I get them. I think NIH allowed me to be the most creative, the most daring, the most bold, because it gave me an opportunity many probably won't have. So I've been writing grants since doctoral work. I've written a lot. I have failed tremendously on many of the grants that I've written, but I like them because even in failure, you learn how to continue to persevere. It's the hurdles. You learn how to be, persevere. I write, and I also even write children's book because we got to get the next generation ready, right? There will be a lot of bumps along the way for them. So it's important for me to always think back about that, the next generation and get them moving too for some of the health issues we're addressing. And so, but in particular with my milestone with sustainability, I started in 2014, trying to write a K to look at system science ways of how you sustain. The idea of it was how do we use system science methods to sustain health interventions in West Africa. It wasn't funded then. Then I talked about sustainable enterprises. I think in those days I was thinking of marketplaces, like how people do a lot of health interventions in marketplaces places. So sustainability for me at that time was place. Like, where are those stable places that are not going to move? Like in many of our settings, markets are really one of those stable places. Churches could be another one, you know, faith-based places. But I wanted to infuse health in those places with the hope that even if I pull out, those places pick it up and continue. It didn't get funded. You know, I kept on thinking of it should, you know, because any place you go in any part of Africa, you know, and for us, markets are a way of life. You know who you're buying your fish from or your meat from because you're constantly going back there to that same person. You know, it's not, you know, cold as you might see in some of the West. We know who we are ordering our frozen, you know, fish or, you know, consistently. And we've always had those relationships in marketplaces. So I felt it was crucial that we really use that as a sustainable platform to really do health interventions, especially for those at the base of the pyramid. It still wasn't funded. Nobody thought it was important. And so then I just, you know, met Professor Benga Gedebe that time. He was doing his work in Ghana at that time, and, you know, his tax shifting strategies. And so then I pivoted. I wasn't doing hypertension. It was mostly HIV at up until that stage. And so then I pivoted and said, well, here he is doing a clinical trial, impressive clinical trial. Could we try to think through how we sustain it? And so for the first time, it was an RO3 that got in, and I started thinking of that. But I didn't give up on, can we still do something sustainable? And Jewel intervention is an intervention developed Johns Hopkins. It was an intervention for drug using women. Could you teach them how to bead jewelry at that time and teach them HIV? And so maybe if you give them economic empowerment, give them HIV, then you would see, you know, prevention, you know, risky behaviors reduced. I loved it. I thought, you know, that makes sense. You know, we have a lot of crafts in a lot of African settings. You know, go to any marketplace today, there are people sewing clothes, there are people making. So why not bring sort of that craft industry together, get them, you know, motivated about HIV, because they will always be stable entities. And then maybe we, you know, begin to infuse something along those ways. Nobody liked that too, so it wasn't funded. Then we thought about creating tools. Okay, fine, let's measure it. When people are saying let's measure sustainability, what does that look like, especially for our setting, right? If you think of implementation science, a lot of the tools for this field are from the West. And so it was crucial, at least for the next iteration of you know, future implementation scientists, we're going to have to build tools in our settings that make sense for us. You know, it was close, but it was a good score, that grant, but it still wasn't funded. So this just showed to you that, especially when you are bold enough to name your work sustainable, whatever, the system isn't ready for it. Reviewers are not ready for it. Everybody, almost all of these grants were called ambitious. Nobody thought, you know, we should be thinking about sustainability, and this was as far back as just 10 years ago. Right? Nobody was thinking it's something worth funding because we're supposed to, you know, write these grants forever and not think, you know. So I was like, give me money, let me last now, as opposed to have cycles of grants over and over again. Like, if I can study it now, maybe we can begin that process of starting with the end in mind. But you know, they were ahead of the time, with the exception of the RO3, and nobody really cared. And so when you think of implementation science, this idea of, you know, the goal ultimately is that we want to close the gap between what we know works and what we're doing in practice. But the reality is the gap is not clean. It's a messy gap. So many stakeholders involved, so many partners. It's a messy gap, and it's not just the fine line of bring the research, take it to practice, and somehow it lasts. And if you really dive into the gap, you know, we all know the 17 years from that research to it being in real world setting, but for the whole world to actually do it, WashU would say that in some of the data they come up that it will actually take 120 years. You know, that what's the evidence for really 100% of use? You know, you can see we will be dead before people even use it. So, you know, then, you know, quickly you realize that it's not futile. We cannot keep doing work that cannot get to everybody in the right time, you know, given the issues we're all addressing with. And then the other one that used to hit me was just, even if you do get the money and you do good work, 2 years after you're done, you are done, you know, because, you know, it's almost like poof, that work came, it was viable work, but at least 40% of those works would not remain. And so, you know, all of that made you say, okay, let's pause. Am I the first? I'm sure people have thought about this. You know, when they thought about this in the past, what were they thinking? And I always come back to this paper by Thomas Borsat, 1990, so it's not new. Can they get along without us? I mean, if we're in 2025, the same questions can be asked, right? That's what we're seeing, right? Where people are saying there's been a lot of donor-supported health projects, right, in Central America and Africa. Can they actually get along without us? That was 1990. So I'm not the first to say it. And he would say back then that in these donors places, whether you're in Central America and Africa, and yes, many of the fundings may have come from the West, if those places got their economic will, their political will, their institutional will together, yes, some of these donor-funded projects will last, especially if they have been demonstrated effectiveness of those projects having clearly defined goals and objectives, especially if you've done a good job of ensuring those activities are integrated, right, into existing program. You have gotten significant funding, so like not just one group doing, but the other group needs to meet up and maybe even surpass. If you can do that with some budgetary and cost recovery, negotiating project design from, beginning in a mutual respect and process of give and take, and train, because you will pull out, but you need to train the next generation, no matter how small, to be ready for that pull out. If you could do all of that, the ideas of remaining is actually doable. And then this is like when I think of how we came up with plan, it was because of this paper, Shidiak, Riskila, Lee, and Bone. And what they did was they gave truly the ABCs of sustainability, and it being begin with a plan for the activities, whatever activities you're going to be doing, begin with a plan for that, begin with a plan for the benefits, right? Begin with a plan for whatever, who's going to benefit from this work, begin with a plan for that. But then again, back in 1998 with Shidiak and Riskila and Bone paper, they were saying build capacity, support the recipient. People need to have capacity. You can't just do work, pull out, and not train. Whatever that activity is, whoever's benefiting, make sure we are building capacity over time. And then I always pause with this work, Marion Schreier's work, because today Marion Schreier is dead. Marion Schreier was really one of the pioneers of this field. Marion Schreier was arguing since the late 90s about the fact that we need to be thinking of sustainability. So my point of it being, she's late now, but yet we still have not realized the vision of her work. And so that's why I keep saying there will be hurdles, but we are hopeful that even if I may not see the end, the next generation can pick up that mantle and continue. So hopefully anybody on this call is going to join and pick up the mantle where Marianne Schreier left it, because she would argue, if she was alive today, that it is possible. It is possible when you're quickly adapting these programs, whatever your activities are, make sure you're thinking of your adaptation over time. You're going to need a project champion. I mean, none of this occurs if there is no champion addressing this. Again, that integration, the fit of your project needs to also fit the systems where they're being implemented. Who is benefiting, right? Not just at the patient level, but your staff. They too should be benefiting and seeing that they have a hand in this, and obviously more partners. You cannot do sustainability work as an entity alone. You're going to need more partners, country-driven partners. And if you do that, it then is possible to do this work. Shannon, Whitler, and Steinman said, well, there are some things, before we get there, though, we need to define some things. So define sustainability, define what we mean by those benefits, time frame, because some people think when you've done work and followed people for 6 months, somehow you sustain it. That's not the case. You need to be judicious with the time frame that, for some of us, it might take 3 years before we actually see. Some it might take 10, but truth of the matter is you need to have an appropriate time frame of what you mean by that. Study the changes you're going to be going through and measure. And then the same thing Enola then would say, we should be thinking of it. This was 2015. So literally a decade ago, an entire panel came together and said, we need to be thinking of sustainability of the work we're doing, thinking of it from the questions we're asking so that we all have a unified agenda on what we mean by that. we're going to need methods. We're going to have some really heavy skill methods on what we actually even mean by sustainability research, and then continue to build these pockets of infrastructures that are really consolidating what is known, identifying those unanswered questions, and maybe ultimately formulating a plan to get us there. And it led to even the work that we did about 9 years ago too now, where that R03 grant that I finally got, this was the outcome of that R03 grant, where we then looked, so even though it was focused on Ghana tax shifting, what was good about the R03 was the aim one was, let's just go look through and see what else has the region done when it comes to sustainability. And we use definitions of like the benefits, the activities, capacity. And to be frank, people have been thinking about this work. Even in the time frame of 1996 to 2015, we came across 41 papers, a lot of them in Kenya, Nigeria. HIV was a common topic. Few used sustainability framework, but what was good about our region is ownership, that the fact that, you guys are the evidence of it. Country ownership was crucial. Mobilization internally, country was crucial. At the bare minimum, having a plan. At the bare minimum, having a plan. And so those were some of the things that just got us ready to start saying, okay, fine, if that's what they've said historically, how do we move forward? Knowing that there will be hurdles, but opportunity. And so what is the hurdles? The fact of the matter is 50% of all our projects won't last, no matter what we do. And so being honest and real that there's a leaky research pipeline. A lot of it is research waste. I mean, think of taxpayer money, and we're not being judicious in terms of how we're actually sharing back the results, whether we make it or not, whether we fail or not. Avoidable flaws, biases, not even systematically reviewing to see how you're adding to the literature, besides always thinking I'm brand new. And so even if we implement only 14% maybe implemented, but most would never last. And that is a hurdle that is true about every project you think of that is trying to get to sort of that last mile of thinking of scaling up or sustaining. Time is another big one. And the fact of the matter is, especially if you see this framework, by the time you've initiated, especially if it's a 5-year project, right? By the time you've initiated and you started implementing, right? It takes a while before it gets to full use. You see that month 30. And for most of us, we're getting ready to close. And so we usually don't build in enough time to last, right? Because, it takes a lot to initiate, takes a lot to implement, right? Because some of us might still just be struggling with just, trying to navigate implementation. It's not easy to do this works in real world settings. And so some of us may go to full use and some of us just may not, and so time becomes a crucial one. But the one that always stuck to me, and it's this paper, is that almost nobody has a plan to continue. The assumption is that we'll write another. And this is what was interesting about this one, is that they brought researchers with R01 grants who said they will think of sustainability, right? It was part of their bread and butter. Like they wrote that as part of their grants, that sustainability is key. And right there, and I think if you dug deeper into the abstract, you would see that almost none of them had a plan to continue. And if anything, this is really in the paper where, they would say sustainability is something that we researchers, we think much about. I mean, we're going to write more grants. And yes, we'll say in the end, we'll publish in leading journals. The assumption is somebody else would do something, I mean, these are tough times to do NIH work, but let's just be real, right? Many of us start these work, we start doing real good work. And if it's good, we may figure out how we renew and continue. If it's not good and there's something shiny like, LAIs or something coming along the way, there's so much more, people are AIs, people are talking about it. You just boom, pivot and you run to go do that work, forgetting you've actually done good work that maybe needs more renewal because you haven't gotten there, right? And so, that's something we're all going to have to grapple with, that, these are taxpayer money, and we do need to be much more accountable for how we're spending them. And some projects maybe don't need to be sustained. Some just need to stop. I agree. But for the good ones that have amassed data, have connected with people, real world people, what are your thoughts in terms of keeping them over time? And so this is, towards the end of our project, the eye test was when we sort of started thinking so much like what would it look like if you actually were planning to last, right? And we came up with this framework that, to begin that process, it needs to begin not just at the implementation, because that's usually when people think of it, you're already now moving ahead and you're moving. The process of ending begins from the beginning, because the reality is, if it's an NIH funded grant, especially R1 and any of these big grants, in 5 years' time, you're going to end. I mean, that's just a given, right? In 5 years' time, but for the grace of God and good leadership, you may or may not get funded, and so how are you conceptualizing your ability to outlive the noise that may or may not be there 5 years from now, especially if you're dealing with young people, right? If it's that you met a 14-year-old today and they're negative, but they're remaining in a country where risk is high, am I supposed to believe that if your project stopped at 19, the kid is safe? That's actually when you need to make sure you're remaining, because now you got to get through 19 to 24, right? Or 19 to 30 to ensure that kid is remaining negative. Or if the kid then all of a sudden becomes positive at 20, are you there to get them into systems so that they can get their treatment and get through virus suppression? It's not enough to start a project and then you stop, assuming somebody's going to pick it up, especially when you're dealing with young people, right? Because many of these projects are terminated at the most crucial time when we need to continue. In other words, that's when it's a dip, of course, because having no funding in any project, it won't last. It's a dip. But what I'm trying to say is that dip, that you actually double down and go deeper so that you really get through, so that vision of an age-free generation, it's not a mouth, but we can actually begin to achieve it for so many people to come. And so I like to always go to Sesame Street just to, loosen this up a bit, because we all know Sesame Street. We've all grown up with Sesame Street. And so what, if anything, can we learn from them? I think this was last year when Elmo sent a tweet out. I'm just checking it. I wonder if he could do that this year to see where we may all be. Because last year when he did it, it says, how's everybody doing? He got 209 million people responding that they're not doing good. And that was last year. So you can only imagine if Elmo came back this year and said, let him just check in where people will be. He'll probably overdo 209, because I'm sure so many people are not doing. But you can see, the reason I always go here is just to tell you how much people can still relate and gravitate to a puppet, but a puppet who's thinking of them, a puppet who's thinking of their real world needs. And it's not just any puppet. I mean, Sesame Street has been here for as long as we can think of, 56 years and counting. It is not just bringing things together. There is an intent from day one in terms of its value being mission driven, child focused, helping children grow smarter, stronger, and kinder, right? With people like educators, creators, researchers, regular moms and dads and caregivers, over 400, just passionate about how do we ensure we're helping our kids be smart, strong, and kind. All sorts of learning occurring, not just ABCs, but during COVID, they were there. We're talking about DEI. They have shows on DEI right now, and they constantly adapting themselves, over 150 countries. Many millions of children have had access to early education, critical health lessons, helpful tools for tough situation, and joy, right? Lots and lots of joy, because the world needs a little bit of joy. There's nothing wrong with that. And ultimately, and with each wave or each decade, you see that they keep nurturing that which makes them who they are, right? Mission driven, child focused, helping children grow smarter, stronger, and kinder. For me, in preparation, I dug into you guys a bit. You guys are 9 years and counting, but it's been interesting to see your evolution from from being University of Maryland to IHVN, and just really your group right now, at least the group that invited me, 9 years and counting. And so really, what can we also learn from you is what I said, that you're running this country innovation. You're actually in real time doing this work of planning your ability to last with so many people, whether it be your faculty members and your 600 program starts in about 8 countries, right? Just constant learning, right? Whether it's a mentored international exchange, your workforce development, you're constantly, just creating these opportunities for mutual. I mean, the country innovation meeting here is that exchange for that mutual learning, right? It's going to give you guys greater understanding and cooperation. My personal favorite was your continuous, quality improvement, your CQI. Which a beautiful framework on how you do that from your pre-implementation to implementation and above. And then you ultimately are here to nurture how we translate HIV scientific research into service delivery interventions. That is your ethos. That is who you are. Ultimately, grounded in just wanting to improve human condition globally, safeguarding communities against health threats and promoting health equity. So I'm here to say you already have a plan. It's in motion. You might want to diversify it now, given the systems we find ourselves in, but you guys are already working towards that and thinking through where else should we be going in terms of building our ethos so that people can see us as that stable entity that is not just here for 9 years, but 9 more years and beyond, right? In terms of that stable entity that's doing this good. So you're a good group to emulate as far as I'm concerned, right? And so from my group, in terms of our project in Nigeria, we are the innovative tools to expand youth-friendly HIV self-testing. We use crowdsourcing open challenges to optimize HIV self-testing strategies for young people. It's interesting that the last time I was here in Abuja, self-testing, HIV self-testing had officially not come into the country. Only 2 studies, Dr. Morenike's study and your study, had done it at that time with key pups. And so you guys were sort of the pioneers that were, I think your study in particular with K-pops said, they would be willing to buy it for 1,900 Naira at that time. So you led the way for us to come in, building off of the work Dr. Morenike did and you guys had done, said, well, could we begin to take self-testing to more young people? So we started 2018, 3 things and I think I spoke to you in the beginning, Dr. Adebajo, just to say, how are we going to do this work? Because there's no self-testing yet. And you're like, you're going to do it. We did it, and looking back, we did. What we said was we're going to crowdsource. We're going to go to young people, give crowdsource idea, crowdsource being open contest. If you think of all the contests that's happening in the continent, we sort of built on that to say, could we create a contest on HIV self-testing just to get young people involved? And could they help us develop strategies on how we roll it out? And then when we did that, we got some finalist ideas or think of finalist winners. There were about 5 of them. And then we began to pilot them individually where they are. And then in the end, we combined all those finalists into one. We took the key lessons from all 5 of them and rolled that into a clinical trial that officially ended 2023. So it's been an amazing journey of going from that open challenge to a design-a-thon. So the design-a-thon, so open challenge, I think we got about 900 entries or so all across Nigeria, took top people into a design-a-thon where they met for 48 hours to continue to tinker their project. And then for about a month, 5 of them went into sort of this capacity building. So remember, in those older papers, you're going to always constantly think of building capacity. And then we took some of those ideas and implemented them across 7 local government areas. And then it rolled on to become a step-wedged RCT in 32 local government areas. This is some lessons learned. The fact that we had all sorts of people across our systems, from youth implementers, youth ambassadors, a whole lot of steering committees, and a whole lot of partners involved. And was the way we used our partners were the judges, for example, for the contest. So they saw us co-build those interventions from the beginning, giving us feedback from the beginning as we built it. There were lots of learning. We did, whether it was the open challenge or the design-a-thon or the boot camp, we had constant learning to be willing to iterate us as we go along. I always like the adapt, because if you see the grants, we never wrote in things like, let's have an app, especially a photo verification app, or even the USSD code. Those are ideas that the young teams came up with, that we incorporated into the project. And then we're thinking now, part of the meetings today is just policy, right? How are we going to do better with getting young people committed and engaged with research? So the broader implications for us is that we were able to get a lot of young people motivated to do research, a lot of young people who have never been involved in having a voice or a say in how you design interventions. They became involved. In HIV self-testing, which was really our primary outcome, was increased from baseline to at 24 months follow-up. And it was feasible, at least for us. We were able to say you can crowdsource such an intervention, ask young people to increase uptake, and it would. But for me, I think the greater joy is that for youth by youth became so many other things, and I'll share that. That when we look back at the lessons from day one, even the idea of being for youth by youth. So it's I-Test on the NIH grant name, but for youth by youth is really, this project is for them by them. And so it was
I think your internet must have gone down. Juliet, can you still hear her?
Yeah, no, I can't.
Okay. I think her internet went down.
Yeah, and she's dropped off.
Yeah, okay. She'll probably join back in.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
In the interim, Chinedu, do you want to give guidelines for the questions? Maybe
Yeah,
you should
definitely.
drop
Thank
them.
you. Thank you very much. So, folks, as the presenter continues in a short while, if you already have questions, you can drop them in the chat box, so that once she's done, we can take the questions as they were, as they came in. We'll also give opportunity for people at the end of the of her presentation to be able to ask questions. But if you already have questions, so you don't lose track, you can post them in the chat group. I see somebody has just joined. Let me see if it is her. She must be scrambling to get back in onto the meeting. Is she in Abuja?
And she's rejoined. She's rejoining.
Okay.
Maybe she can turn off her
Our video.
video. Yes.
Is she in
okay.
Abuja?
Yes,
Yeah,
she
I'm
is
in
in Abuja.
Okay.
No
Maybe we'll
worries.
consider. Yeah. Sorry
Mhm.
about that.
It's okay.
So I was saying, we know our people. We have a platform for young people. It is theirs, youth driven, youth inspired with them. We continue to learn. None of this work would happen without saying you spend time to do that co-mutual learning. So not just us teaching or imparting knowledge, but actually taking the time to learn from them. And we change and we document how it is messy to do this kinds of work. But it's also important to be
Yeah. Internet again.
Yeah.
Hey guys, here we're gonna manage. We're almost there.
You're almost
Um,
there. Just keep
so
going.
that work went on to give birth to so many children, whether it's our cancer work. We're now heavy into cancer, especially with getting and for us, if you see what happened with the national rollout, important, powerful work. But I would argue was also a missed opportunity to not have done more. So if we know we need to do the 90, 70, 90, and so Nigeria rolled out to do the 90, it was a big missed opportunity to have done the 70. You got consent from so many parents to vaccinate girls that we somehow missed their mothers. And it's nothing that I'm saying new. So this is our For Girls and women's study. If they had maybe a true tried and true implementation scientist in that group, you would have seen that they've been doing mother-daughter interventions in South Africa since as far back as 2012. That it's a missed opportunity to only vaccinate girls and not screen mothers, knowing that, the girl might, be vaccinated, but may lose her mother 10 years from now. And so for us, trying to nurture, these things that are akin in our society, mother-daughter relationships, just dyadic family relationships, so that we're not just keeping health for just kids on one side and adults for the other side, knowing health is a function of the whole and it's not separate. Music, we are exporting music in the tons. And whether we like it or not, our music is going far. Could we use it for health? That too is another project that this platform has created, where for us it's not only about looking at what's the problem in Nigeria, what's the deficit, what, yes, everybody's, we have headaches. Nigeria is a tough country, I agree, but what is our assets, and can we use that for good, for health? And so at least keeping these projects in mind for Youth by Youth has at least allowed us to have that. And so what's the future direction? I share this now a lot these days because we are all in a dip. Where your results have been, where your efforts are, but then boom, a mandate will come and boom, it's almost like everything is wasted. But I want to assure you that, if you see where the arrow is pointing, that dip is usually small, but if you lean into it, the best of your work is coming. And I think for me and all of us that are really committed to doing this work, for the justiceness of it, right? The fact that the right to health is for all of us. This is a dip that we would get through to get to the top of where we all need to be for our constituents. And so for me, this is where we now become very creative. I've been telling people we're going to need to look at philanthropy. I know people say nobody wants to talk about them, but we need to all begin to think of how we diversify our portfolio, because keeping it all in one basket is how we find ourselves in. And it will require all of us having the plan, right? Thinking of the right people, learning, adapting, nurturing, core values of each of our different interventions, whether it's our capacity or CQI, whatever it is you feel you need to be marketing and training people on. This is the time to plan it well, so that you're really generating additional things that allow you to remain. And so you're not only putting things in one basket. So that my milestone of failing, 2023 was then the first time I was able to finally get an intervention that is going to now study what it means to begin with that end in mind, sustaining innovative tools, with the goal to continue to use our designathons to really develop plans for sustainment. We're going to bring, a lot of people together, CBOs together, to watch how that plan is nurtured over time, and then hopefully characterize and estimate its impact over time. And I think I like to stop here by saying, until we begin to tell that story, the story has been told by the historians for so long. The funders have had the power. Yes, they've always told the stories, but we're the lions and we're brave, and so, if we know we want to have that vision of rights to health for all, you're going to have to do that with ending, that beginning with the end in mind, planning to last, so that, our story is not going to only be of the hurdles or the travails, but maybe even the bravery of how we got through this dip as lions. So I'll pause, and so many people to thank, and just open it up for questions.
Hey, wow. Thank you so much, Juliet. This was very rich and very, 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 very incisive. And sorry about your internet challenges. It comes with the terrain. We're going to open it up for questions, for comments from the folks. If you have questions, like we said, you can put them in the chat box, or you can feel free to put up your hand, and then we will take it from there. And don't be shy. So let's see if we have any hands up. I have 3 screens now. Okay.
I can ask you guys. Because I said I'm here to learn too. What are your plans for sustaining your work?
Oh, no, definitely. We're going to talk about, okay, Sylvia has raised her hand. Let me allow Sylvia go.
Not
Sylvia,
to answer the question, not to answer, but to ask a question.
Okay, ask, yeah. So don't worry, Juliet, we'll talk about our sustainability plans.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay,
Sylvia,
thank you very
go
much,
ahead.
Juliet. Thanks very much for the rich presentation. Um, so the issue here is if you have an intervention, you know, an ongoing intervention, at what point do you start measuring and what metrics would you recommend or framework would you recommend is used to track the sustainability? So if you say start, to plan for sustainability right from the start, how do you track that? And how do you know? I mean, if a project is funded for 5 years, that will last beyond the 5 years. That's where
Um,
everybody starts from, right?
Yeah. So for sure, the beginning, especially because if you think of how we wrote these our grants, you already had a timeline. Let's be fair, right? You already had a timeline of ending, right? Especially if you're going for these donor funded stuff, they make you put a timeline. And so all of us already put the timeline. I think the fallacy is when we then get it, assuming this timeline is indefinite. I think that's where we start. We get into the habit of quickly starting and running. Where what I'm saying is that beginning, as soon as the money comes, you should actually say, okay, this money will end. Let's not get used to it. And so let's start from the beginning, tracking what we're doing. So with the plan framework, and we're gonna bring back some of the things in our meeting with the patch group, sustainability group. If you see what the frame IS people have done, where they are tracking how people adapting over time. So that one of those papers that I'll share was a good frame paper where it helped us look at, pay attention to all the changes we were doing and documenting. And so you could see from year one what we did year two, what we did year three. Plan is developing something like that. And so when we have our meeting in March, we're supposed to lay out this blueprint now for you guys to see how you can have that sort of a spreadsheet and then watch that annually over time, right? And then you can use tools like PSAT, CSAT. So there's some really good tools that exist. There's another one I'm forgetting his name. Lawrence Palinka's own tool is actually my favorite, and I'll share that with you. That allows you to measure at least from the benefit side of things, right? And benefits not just at the patient level, but your staff level, because they need to also be keyed in to believe that this work is so good that it to continue this work. The apathy is real and it would not be there for it to last. And so there's some things we're going to share as we come together for our sustainability working group, that I say stay tuned, and we will at least showcase how you're watching what you have planned. And you've done that, right? If you see in that working group, you've created that plan. So our job now is to help you monitor that over time. Will this work or not? I expect hurdles, I expect dips, along the way, but can we pay attention to it to get us in a better shape so that, for us, before your year 5 hits, by your year 4, you need to know where you're going. You sort of need to diversify so that you're not waiting till the end to say, what should we do next? You're always constantly thinking of, there's so many things that have come out in this next 4 years that we should actually pivot. I didn't plan cancer when we look at eye test, but because we were tracking these things over time, that it made sense to pivot because we knew how to move around, screening people. And so, so many conversations. We had parents that used to bring their teen kids to our project. So we were always navigating this, that it said, should we really bring mothers and kids together? They already come. Could we have created something that would have brought them better together? And so that cancer opened the door, that we were already pivoting there before even eye test ended. And I think if you're doing that judicious job of learning on the go all the time, you would see innovations rise up on their own that some of you may move over to champion while you continue to move the space you're in. And I think that's, my people perish for a lack of plan. That idea of really writing it down, it may not come here, they have a click, it may not happen, but write it and have it somewhere and then watch that over time is all we're advocating for.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So Juliet, I'm going to ask a question. And one of the analogies you provided was quite interesting, the Sesame Street analogy. And it really struck with me because, in the middle of that, I think the sustainability or the persistence of Sesame Street has been because the focus has really been nothing else but on the mission of children. And I think that that's key. It really struck me to say that truly, this is something that has, but I want to ask you a very practical question. So we're talking about sustainability. And one of the things that I've always struggled with from a sustainability standpoint is when some of these grants are given in terms of capacity transfer, I don't really see capacity transfer being tracked. People just, I think for a lot of researchers, it's more about the papers that come out and the data. So in your own experience, how have you been able to track capacity transfer from, from the fact that this is you up in the US, you fly into Nigeria, maybe 4 or 5 years, the grant is over. How many people can you say that if you never go back to Nigeria, right, they can run with your purpose, like Sesame Street? I guess that's my point. And then after that,
I mean, you are wasting time if you're not building capacity. That's just the honest truth. And so for us, I went out of my way because I work with NIMA, so Nigerian Institute of Medical Research, and I saw the people that were there. And going out of your ways that you're actually talking to them, you're getting to know them, you're listening to their dreams. And then, yes, we're here to collect data and do work, but when you did, step away and get to know your people, you realize that they too have visions and dreams. And so in that process of getting to know them, 2 of them, said they had these dreams of wanting to do PhD. It's not on the we did not write capacity building, but I was able to solicit funds and do what I needed to do. And they came over to SLU, spent 2 years with me 2 years, 3 years to go through that whole process, such that by the time we were ending and a year or so afterwards, they finished at SLU with their PhD. That is the tangible, and they're back now at NIMA with their PhD. And you can see how we're continuing to build work beyond just eye tests. I'm also involved with them, working on them on their own. So in fact, one of them did Ks. Now we're actually now trying to build their K43 and get them moving along the way.
Okay.
Some of these things would have to occur outside of the grant. And it's for that humanity where we need to know ourselves beyond just even the grant, right? Where if you see a tangible need, right? And if and it may not be you connect. It may, not everybody will probably come to SLU, but if I knew a way of connecting someone to something else and we build capacity, in the end, it works out for all of us. And so maybe a little bit of our humanity now more than ever is needed to lift one builder. You don't want to take the ladder, climb up, and then you pull it up and nobody climbing with you. Of what use is your legacy, right? If you climbed all the way to the top and there were not people, you just took the ladder and walked away. And each one is going to have to reach one in however we can find, so that somebody else remains to tell that story, right? For when we're gone. We're going to need to build our own army that would say we started this journey. I mean, the reality is there are 2 most important days: the day we were born, the day we died. And everything else is a noise. But who's going to make that noise, continue our noise when we're gone? Capacity building isn't.
Right. Yeah, I think that I would say my people perish for lack of capacity transfer.
Hey, that too.
Yeah, I see Mary Claude's hands was up. Mary Claude, sorry. You can go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
perfect. Hi, Juliet. It's Marie-Claude Leroy from University of Maryland, Baltimore. Thank you for your excellent presentation. I feel that the title was very timely, and thank you for your words of encouragement. Yeah. So I'm here in Zambia at the moment, and actually I'm with we're doing the D43 training and implementation science. So in the room, I'm joined by 10 excellent fellows in implementation science, so 11. So it was really encouraging, I think, for everyone sitting in the room today to see your journey, that it was not 100% success rate. There's been often we see the success of researcher, but behind all of that, there's also failure. And I think today you show a good example of tenacity. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that with us. My question to you is, and I'm sure you've been asked this question before, how do you balance the need for sustainability in the light of a lot of unknown about, does your intervention work? So how do you frame sustainability from the beginning, but with also uncertainty that maybe you don't want to pursue your intervention based on the result of your study? So And then one question, and then maybe there's fellows that, I will let you answer this question, and then if other fellows here would like to ask a second question, we'll follow up.
Right. So there's a group of folks that do sustainability. They say, what's the minimum viable, right? So in the big scheme of things, not every part of your intervention will remain. But if you're paying attention over time, there's a minimum threshold. So almost like a window of opportunity, there's a minimum that you want to at least keep and let that one continue to tell his story. So for us, our first crowdsourcing event was our World AIDS Day. It was supposed to be the one-time thing. We did it and moved on. It's almost 6-7 years now. We continue doing the World AIDS Day thing because it's the minimum. Because for us, it's important to continue to engage young people. I think if you study what you're doing over time and study it well, you will see that there are these low-hanging things that you can hold on to tell the story of your work. And so I don't think you should expect the full-blownness to remain, because that requires a whole lot of funding. In fact, with our World Days thing, it was usually in person. COVID made us pivot to online. And so that was even cheaper and so much more easier to maintain, that every year we're constantly engaging new sets of young people to get them remaining to talk about HIV, not just for themselves, but for their cohorts and team. I think finding that minimum viable will be crucial. So as you think of, and it could be minimum viable, it could be windows of opportunity. Where do you tap in so that you remain? There was another question you asked, or was it that you said fellows were going to ask a question?
Let me see if we have some. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This is Muvita Myunda from University Teaching Hospital in Zambia, Lusaka. I'll start with a comment first. I'm inspired by your presentation and also your journey, and also the number of publications that you've been able to make, and also the impact that you've had in Nigeria. Not only in Nigeria, I think it has spread to other countries. You also indicated that you also engaged Kenya and other countries. Yes. And yeah, the findings you indicated in your presentation. I think I'll start first of all with a comment. My comment is that I think a lot of research has been done in Africa, Zambia inclusive, a lot of research. And you indicated that research knowledge, if it's not applied, it's of no use. I think the challenge, maybe you can just comment on the challenge that is there. We know that countries in the West and other developed countries, they also do a lot of research, but after research, I think they do a lot of implementation. And I think one of the contributing factor to the implementation is that they have got resources to support the implementation. And I think most of the grants that we get, most of them also come from developed countries. I don't know, I think one of the other thing, in addition to getting grants from other countries to support the implementation of the evidence that we get from research, I think the other thing is that I don't know how you would advise to engage governments also to support some of the evidence that comes from the research works that are done by our countries in Africa. I think some of the solutions may even come from Africa, so that Africa should not only be waiting from developed countries to provide us with solutions. I think maybe that is the comment and the question in itself. Thank you.
No, I mean, what you're saying is timely. It's where we're gonna have to learn during this period of uncertainty, and that's why I had that slide on dip. This is when we really come together. This is when we begin to reimagine what else should we be doing for our own sustainability, right? This is not the time to leave it up to others to decide how we last. I think what's good about this is that almost all of us have a community. Almost all of us have policies makers we're interacting with this is the time of, and they're all watching, everybody's watching what is happening, you know, so it's not unheard of that, you know, to hear that governments are pulling off of WHO, they are watching and everybody's hearing. And so how are you sitting up together with your policymakers, with your key stakeholder partners to say, what are we doing? We had another meeting planned, but it was so perfect to be here at this moment having those conversations, because it's really happening, right? Everybody's seeing and paying attention to what's happening in one of the major funder country, knowing that it has ripple impact for so many. I mean, elections really do have consequences. And so the question then is, how are we going to come together as a community to learn from each other? You know, so what I was saying is you guys already have a product, your CQI product, that is already, you know, in a whole lot of phase where you already have that on your website. I saw that for myself. This could be the time where you plan how you teach it, maybe plan how you mass produce it so that more people can have access to it. You know, maybe not a whole lot of money, but start doing training, because CQI used to be something in the West, right? Where everybody said they do it in the West and it's there, but you're on the ground implementing it right now with your own lessons and variations of the Plan, Do, Study, Act that we probably need now being iterated in the field so that more people can see CQI, but locally and not necessarily what we know from. It may not be Plan, Do, maybe you call it something else, but this is how you brand it now and begin that entity that everybody looks up to for really adapting on the go, but then being, being fidel, maintaining your fidelity to that protocol as you adapt on the go. So I think that is, the funding one is going to always be a big one. The hope is that countries will get up and start funding. The reality is it's usually the last thing on people's minds. And so that's why I'm saying being creative. Some days when I go on LinkedIn, I see some of our young kids that came to our programs and got capacity with research and everything. They've moved on to create societies for themselves, and they're now calling abstract. I mean, young people are taking it to another level where I would never have thought if a group of me came together and we've taught research, it should become an entity where people are paying tiny money just to sort of get research skills. It's happening right now where you already have something, right? The entity or end product should not only be your peer-reviewed journal that you put in a journal where few people would read. That's not a good use of all the talent you guys naturally have. It's time to begin that homegrown training and put it in such a package that can be taken from, you're already doing it, but how do you begin to be creative in that process in ways that mirror what so many people do in the West, right? But bring it home. And it would take, bringing a collective like your country innovation group and thinking to how do we plan for ourselves to last, if that makes sense. And maybe perhaps the funding can slowly be generated from those other products you put out there for the market.
Awesome. I think we have 2 more questions from Zambia we can take. I know we are a little bit over time, but we'll take that and then we'll wrap up. Thank you.
We have 2, and so we'll do back to back and then open to Juliet for answer.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon. Daniel Ingam from Zambia. I have 2 questions, actually. The first question is, after a project has ended, because to maintain or to have a sustainability, you need to start working from the beginning of the funding. So after the funding has been completed or cut off, is there a way of having some collateral damage? I think that's the question. Is there a type of work that can be done after that? We were not able to avoid that. The second question is, you've mentioned on leveraging on the asset, and you've gave some example like youth music in Nigeria, which I think was very interesting. Can you just elaborate on that? How did you use those assets to help in health? I think that's my 2 questions.
And one more person?
And
Sure.
one more question.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Anchindika. I'm also from Zambia. I'm currently working with TaskPen, which is part of the HLB Simple. And I'm very honored to have you speak and listen to what you have to say, because I've come across quite a number of your publications, and they've helped us build some of the work that we're doing. So mine is just really a comment. I came across some people from, so I had the opportunity to attend the DNI conference in December last year, and I came across some papers which were kind of leveraging what you were talking about, and now I can see where they got the idea from. They were using, design-a-thons to develop interventions for HPV among adolescent girls, and another one where they used music among the youth to develop interventions for HIV testing and so on. So I think I got that idea from there. And talking about sustainability, I think I would want to agree with the narrative of telling the stories that have been, telling our story well, in order to, influence governments, influence policymakers to continue with the work that has already been done. So, like, for example, if, say, there's a grant that's going on in a country and some of the strategies have been put in place, I feel like analyzing some of these strategies and telling the story of how they worked can help with scale up and sustaining some of the interventions and implementations that have been set up in certain projects. So I think basically mine was just a comment, talking about how I have seen some of the work that Juliet has written and how it has impacted, and how we can actually use those lessons to tell a story that can lead to scale up and sustainability even after the grant has, has come to an end. Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that comment. So quickly, after a project has ended, there might be collateral damage, and what do you do? I think that's what actually has been the case, where projects end and there are collateral damages, where you've gone into communities, built trust, connected with so many people, and for some reason you just leave. And I think what we're saying to do is that we change or reverse that, so that people actually are beginning to plan with the end. And so if you're actually planning and learning and doing adaptations and all of that, what we're saying is you will see where you need to pivot early, as opposed to waiting for the end. Because if you plan early, you can pivot and adapt or make your changes early for the other directions you can go. The one on leveraging assets, that's my go-to, because, especially for our region in Africa, we're always the deficit. We're always made to seem like we don't have good things here. Meanwhile, we have good food. People are fighting about jollof rice every day. We have good things here that should be leveraged for our health. And so music was an easy one. When we saw the opportunity, we knew we had a youth platform, because that opportunity was asking for youth-driven interventions around blood pressure. We knew we had a youth platform. We knew if you talk to young people about music, they will connect. And true and fold, we have a 30-minute album now created by young people on high blood pressure, pure Afro beats. We're rolling it out, and we're going to see if it's going to really help them help their parents, not even them, help them help their parents reduce their blood pressure and become more aware of stroke. So in other words, using young people as that conduit of health messaging, health framing for their elderly that may have high blood pressure and stroke. So it's a missed opportunity to not think of health from that collective whole, right? Where you're always bringing each generation together so that we learn from them. Those are the assets that are here. I learned from my grandmother about my health. And so it makes sense that we continue to leverage that group, that dynamic in our setting that is unique to us, to build out our intervention. This idea of individual-based interventions, or you're only dealing with child, leave mother, that's very West. That's not us. Health is a function of the whole. And so when you're thinking of the assets, think of those assets that make sense to us and build out interventions from there. And thank you for the comment. I strongly believe in the stories we get to tell. We do a call for paper every day where we're asking people to tell us their stories. I mean, the publications are important, but there's nothing as powerful as a story, a poem, of music, because those are the things that transcend times. And so trying to think of how we repackage our research into these manageable cells, manageable entities, not just for us, but for our communities, is something I strongly advocate in as well. So thank you for that comment.
Thank you so much, Juliet. We're over time. I see one hand up from the Center for CPHI. I will take that as the last question, and then we'll draw the curtains on today's meeting. So
Sorry, my video is off. The internet
it's
kept on
okay.
being
It's okay. We
shaky.
understand.
So let me.
It's okay. So CPHI, please
video.
go.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Shoyemi. I'm with CPHI. I was opportune to be part of the eye test judges for the boot camp. I think that was last year, and I'm opportune to be here as well. I have a question on the challenges that the team faced during the implementation of the eye test HIV interventions, particularly in terms of accessibility, community engagement. What were the challenges that the team faced? Thank you.
I think if I heard you right, you wanted to know what are some of the challenges we faced with community engagement, accessibility of our projects. Was that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean, if you're working with young people, so I remember in our pilot phases, if you're working with young people, competing priorities will always be number one. So yeah, some of our youth teams dropped out. It's a dip, so expect that. I mean, no project occurs without having dips. So our youth teams dropped out and we had to pivot, and continued with the ones that remained, motivating them and moving them forward. Some teams, even I think at one point we were implementing in Benue State, we had to pull out because of unrest at one point. I mean, the truth of the matter is research has dips. I wish we write that more. We tend to not, but it would be foolish for me to say it was perfect all through. We have dips and staff, we have turnovers. You build these things out with some great staff and they leave the country. It's okay. It's part of the reality. And then you have to start all over again and build it all over again. We went through all that. My hope now is that we hold on to those hurdles because those get you ready for the hope, right? You don't just sit there and just dwell in the dip, because if you do, you will not realize that that's the point where you actually lift. And so my hope is to say to people that it's common to have dips, but use that also to lift up as well.
Thank you so much, Juliet. Well, I think it goes without saying that today's meeting has been one of a kind. There's been an all-round applause from everyone. So let me just be the voice to say, Juliet, it's been a rare honor and a privilege to have you on. We've had a lot of speakers. Everyone has come with their own flavor. Yours has really left the jollof rice-like flavor in the mouth of people, in the ears of people. So thank you.
So I'll ask if it.
Yeah, so I'll just say thank you very much. And we apologize to everyone for going a little bit over time, but I think it was for a reason and for good reason. And just to also let everyone know that we'll also be posting the link for the video, the recording for today. If you want to also see previous recordings, you can also follow the link to see previous recordings of other speakers that we've had. Next month's country innovation meeting, I'm not going to unveil the speaker, but it's somebody who people really would want to be part of. And we encourage all country teams to really encourage other folks to join so that, the learning process is endless. So on behalf of Ciheb Global and the entire University of Maryland, we say very big thank you, Juliet, and we hope that when we call on you again, you'll be available. Thank you so much.
Wahala, not us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Juliet.
Thank
Thanks
you, everyone.
everyone for staying on. See you next month at the next
Right.
meeting.